Was there any mental training also given to you all, to the crew?
One of the tests was where they lock you up in a room without television, without radio, without books, without a clock, without anything, just you and your thoughts for 72 hours.
What about meals, sir? Like, what kind of food?
There were 70 dishes we could choose from.
Oh.
They would map what are your favorites and make sure that that is there, because that contributes substantially to your morale.
What is the difference between a cosmonaut and an astronaut?
The Americans call it that this, astral plane. The Russians call it a cosmos. We are calling our guys Gagannauts.
Was there any fear when you went up, like, I may not make it back to planet Earth?
Give you an idea that on launch, about 10 seconds before launch, my engineer, Gennady, his heart rate was 120. Why? Because 3 months earlier, he was launching for another mission when the rocket exploded on the launch pad due to a fuel leak.
Do they start believing in that respect that, there are higher beings than us who have created this, or demigods or gods?
As far as I'm concerned, everything could have been an accident, could not have been an accident also. If there is some God, won't he have liked to fix everything all the time? If he would have been all-powerful, all-seeing. I know that I got out of those situations not due to my skill. I cannot answer how I got out of those situations.
Divine intervention.
What are your thoughts on aliens? Do you believe they exist?
Oh yes, I do believe.
Why exactly?
Namaste and welcome to this episode of the Oddcast Show. Space is so mysterious but so intriguing. Mankind has always been fascinated by space and going out there and trying to find ways of getting to the farthest corners of our universe. Today, it gives me so much of joy and happiness that, we have the only Indian who's been into space, Wing Commander Shri Rakesh Sharma ji. Namaste, sir. Welcome to the show.
Namaskar.
How are you, sir?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on the show.
It's a privilege for us. It's an honor for us, sir. And let me tell you, this is a very big fanboy moment for me. Because in 84, when you came on TV on Doordarshan, I was 7 years old then, 40 years before today. And when the then Prime Minister Indira ji asked you, how does India look from space? That sentence that you said, Sare Jahan Se Acha, has resonated with, I think, every Indian since then. So, the whole of the country salutes you and, blesses you and thanks you for coming on this show, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So I'm just going to, I have so many questions. I'm so excited, but, what was it like, sir, when you went there? Like, how was it? How was the experience? The training? Like, was it like very extensive training?
Yeah, the training was for 18 months. For an 8-day flight. So, and it was outside the country. It was in the Yuri Gagarin Space Center, which is on the outskirts of Moscow.
Right.
So that's where the training took place. The most difficult part of the training was the fact that we needed to learn the Russian language. And when I say we, I mean my backup, Ravish Malhotra, and myself. So we didn't know Russian, and
they didn't know Hindi or English?
No, so we were given a teacher, and that was one of the experiments they were trying.
Right.
And their thinking was that when a child is growing up in different households and different cultures, they just pick up the language by hearing.
Right.
So they said that we will give you a teacher who doesn't know Hindi or English, and you guys don't know Russian. But as time goes on, you'll be picking it up.
Right.
And at that time, the Iron Curtain was up, and the only channels which were available on TV was all in Russian.
Okay.
Yeah. So So they told us that for your homework you will be watching TV. so there was a bombardment.
That's a good homework, though.
Yeah. But you couldn't understand what the hell was going on. So we used to be in front of the TV during the day. We used to be learning English language, or the moment they felt that we are able to understand, then we switched over to the technical subjects. So that was difficult. And when I said that the Iron Curtain was up, culturally it was a bit of a culture shock, because in India things are so open, whereas over there, during those years, you didn't know who was listening in for what. So it was that kind of a police state around in those days. So that was a bit discomforting, but otherwise it was a new experience. One was always looking forward to it.
Right. So the timing of your expedition into space was in the backdrop of a massive, or rather at the peak of a Cold War between the US and the USSR, the then USSR. Was there any interference from the Americans at that time in terms of, not letting this mission happen? Or was there any sabotage or anything of that sort?
No. There was, we were working in silos.
Right.
There was only competition between America and the USSR. And that competition was more ideological than scientific.
Right.
Because they had to prove to their people, which is capitalism better than communism? So it was a different kind of race. So and they went their separate ways. So there's often a question which is asked: whose technology was better? And the accurate answer was that the side which got the better German scientists, they're better. Werner von Braun and all, after the Second World War.
Right.
So both of them were riding on the backs of German scientists, the space program in America, as well as in the then Soviet Union.
Right.
So, and that's how it went. And as far as we were concerned as kids, that's when Gagarin went up, and it was everybody, the entire globe was captivated by that. It was like science fiction coming alive. And initially, all flights were so well documented. TV hadn't really become mainstream.
Right.
There were print media was there. आज सुबह क्या खाया उन्होंने space में, what happened, and etc. How do you do this? And everybody came back. They went up as astronauts and came back as poets, waxing, eloquence and lyrical about the beauty that is there. So one had and then the photographs in Life magazine, and so pretty much you knew what to expect.
Right.
So it isn't as if you were going there blind, not knowing.
Right.
You had a fair amount of idea.
Right.
So the flight itself, wasn't so, shall we say, surprising.
Right.
So we knew what to expect. And that's what the training did. Basically, the training, there's very little difference between cutting-edge military aviation and space, because it's an extension of that technology.
Right.
So that was not, the technical part wasn't too difficult to absorb. But preparing the human body for changes that happen due to the lack of gravity. So that was the focus for the physical training bit.
Right. But sir, what about mental training here? Because there's a lot of, anxiety, stress involved, when you're having liftoff, when for the first time your body experiences weightlessness, etc., your bodily functions change. There is a big mental aspect to it as well. So was there any mental training also given to you all, to the crew?
As part of the medical selection, one of the tests was where they lock you up in a room without television, without radio, without books, without a clock, without anything, just you and your thoughts for 72 hours.
Oh.
You don't meet anybody, you don't hear anybody. So this is to check you out whether you've got latent claustrophobic tendencies.
Right.
Because that's how you're going to be living in space.
Right.
In a steel cylinder.
Right.
With not much place to move around.
Right.
And you can't go out for a walk, and returning back is not very easy.
Right.
So obviously they checked that aspect out. So there were people who somehow came out after a few hours,
They would just go crazy there.
Yeah, that's it. So they checked that out. And once that is the mental aspect, the other thing which you mentioned is the fact whether you feel nervous, etc. But then you must, just to put it in context, we were fighter pilots, test pilots, and dealing with that kind of stress and as to what may happen.
Right.
One had already.
You had already, you were very well set with that.
Yes.
Right.
You had accepted the fact that it can happen.
Right.
So that's why we flyers, make sure that they don't treat operational flying or military flying as they would, to just get a pilot's license and fly around yourself.
Right.
So there's a quantum difference between the two.
So how long were you a fighter pilot before this step that you took?
Well, I went up into space in '84, and I was a fighter pilot in 1970. So 15 years.
15 years. And that was rigorous training there then?
Yeah. Well. So initially I was in the Indian Air Force. Then I became a test pilot within the Indian Air Force. Then from amongst those, I got selected for the space flight amongst the test flying community. Went up for the space flight, returned back to the Air Force, back to fighter flying. And after that, I was seconded to the industry. And I flew the same aeroplanes, but only testing, not operational, for HAL.
Right.
Who overhaul and manufacture aeroplanes for the Indian Air Force.
Right.
So I was the chief test pilot there for quite a few years till I left flying in 2001.
So after coming back from space, flying these fighter jets must have been like a piece of cake for you then?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that because getting up into space and flying in space, there is no hands-on work.
Right.
Because you're just orbiting the Earth and everything is done by computers, really.
Right.
So, whereas when you're back and you're the captain of your aircraft, it's a single-seat aircraft which it's 300 crores. You've signed for that aircraft and you want to bring it back safe, and if something goes wrong, you can't sweep it under the carpet. I mean, if you have an accident on the road, you just leave the car there, nobody cares.
Yeah.
But here it's big news.
Yeah.
So the stress levels are much higher,
right,
I would say, when you're flying for the Air Force and when you're flying or testing aircraft for the Air Force.
Also, sir, I understand that the crew that went for this mission in '84 to space was primarily Russians, right? And it was just you who was non-Russian, or was there a crew from other countries also on that flight?
Yeah. So then and now, at that time, when this Cold War was on, all the American astronauts with NASA, they were, all Americans.
Right.
And with the Russians, they were all Russians initially.
Right.
Then, like I said, the Soviet Union wanted to demonstrate to the world that we've got these other nations of Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Cuba, and all these guys are, our satellites.
Right.
And they subscribe to our way of...
Our thought process.
Communism, etc. And that's why they offered India, because by then, America had started helping Pakistan. So we were on the other side of the line.
Right.
And as a counterweight, Russia wooed us, and we had a treaty with them. So they wanted to show to the world that India is with
them.
with Soviet Union.
Right. And we wanted to accept that as well, right?
And yeah, initially we didn't want to accept because we were a bit conflicted. Now we were non-aligned, and but you can't stay like that. You got to belong.
Right.
If you want somebody to be a counterweight,
you got
to toe the line a wee bit. So finally, Mrs. Gandhi asked ISRO that, listen, this is an offer, and I think it makes sense if you take this offer, and it'll give a fillip to science and technology. But ISRO said, sorry, we are not interested. We are presently focusing on our satellite program. Therefore, don't ask us.
We don't have anyone.
We are not interested right now, because manned space program is too far out in the future. So we don't want to do it now. So Mrs. Gandhi then offered it to the Air Force, fortunately, and the Air Force grabbed it. And that's how I got lucky.
Right. So what was your family's reaction when you first told them that, no, I'm going to be going into space? Was it like a shock to them, or was it like elation, joy? Was there worry, stress, anxiety there?
The stress was only because of the logistics involved.
Right.
Because they wanted the family to come along.
Oh.
Yeah. And my wife was a professional. She had her own business going in Bangalore. So we would have had to shut shop and transfer. The children were there, transfer certificates. The language is different, a disruption of the education. So all these aspects were there. And we were shipped off to Moscow because Mrs. Gandhi was visiting Soviet Union at that time, and she was going to declare that India has accepted Russia will be training our guys. So we had to be in Moscow while the wife had to do all the logistics back home. And then we came back for a week just to escort the family back.
Speaking of the wife, sir, did your wife, like every other Indian wife, say that, now since you're going to space, bring the moon to me? Bring me the moon. Did she say that?
No, she didn't say that. She was too involved with what we are going to do and whether we will be on time when this guy comes back to ferry us across.
Right.
So
how was the crew like? The Russians as people, how were they like, on the whole mission? Were they friendly? Were they forthcoming? Were they welcoming?
So again, like I said, that those were the days where the Iron Curtain was up, KGB was all around.
All over, yeah.
Everybody was peering over somebody else's shoulder. So the professionals we interacted with, they were cold and distant and need to know. But their families, who our families interacted with while living in that so-called gated community of Yuri Gagarin Space Center, the families were friendly. And I think here we got to thank Mr. Raj Kapoor for the films which the Russians loved.
They loved
Indian
They
films.
still do.
Yeah. So our wives used to be, and everything was a queue in those days, long queues. Stuff was in short supply. And if our wives were standing in saris somewhere at the back of the queue, some lady would come from there and pick them up and move them up. So, so we were, in that sense, a favored...
preferentially treated.
Yeah. So it was easy for them.
Okay.
And the children mixed very well. They started playing with the Russian kids. They learned ice hockey. They learned ice skating. They had a ball.
Okay, great. I'm so glad. So in space, when you first went into space and for the first time when you witnessed or you experienced weightlessness, how does the body react generally? Just for our viewers, just for knowledge, how does the body react? What happens? Do your bodily functions change? I mean, what happens?
No, what really happens is that the biggest difference is the lack of gravity. And when you are transported within 7 or 8 minutes into an environment which has no gravity, Then let's say the heart, which pumps at a certain rate and it clears a certain volume,
Right.
it has to take into account that it is pumping from this level of the heart to the head against gravity. So it has to give that incremental push. And the blood which has gone to your lower extremities, because of gravity, it goes down, but it's got to come back to the heart so that the circulatory system remains efficient and the fluid flow remains efficient. So, and then suddenly you take gravity out of the equation. So the heart continues pumping at the old rate and blood starts collecting in the upper extremities.
Oh.
Your face swells up, your tongue swells up, you feel feverish, and of course it becomes easier to move around because you're weightless,
Right.
as is every other item in orbit. So if you want to go from here to there, you just push this wall or this part of the spaceship, and you, like Superman, you just fly across. But you got to calibrate your push because that's metal on the other side. If you're too fast, you can hurt yourself.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. So it's a different way of living. And the human body is so wonderful. The control system, the closed loop system is so good that it takes about a day and a half to adapt to this new environment. The heart slows down. Okay. It doesn't pump as much stuff. So you attain that new normal which is required to function effectively in orbit, while in orbit.
And it's the same thing, I guess, when you come back.
In reverse.
In reverse, then you go through the whole thing again.
Yes.
Right. And after that, so once you were back on Earth after the 8-day expedition, and I'm guessing it took a couple of days for you to, readjust back to life over here.
Say 1.5, 2 days.
1.5, 2 days. Yeah. After that, any other side effects in the long run, like dizziness or any of those things? Nothing. So you're just back to shape instantly and back on the fighter jets.
Yeah, maybe not so for those who are living much longer. Like today, it's probably is more than 400 odd days. That's the world record.
Right.
And I don't know how they are going to address. They'll have to find newer ways for the human being to survive longer flights in space, because your bones leach. You lose calcium from the bones. After you come back after 8 days, your body feels heavy because for 8 days you've not moved your used your muscles. You don't need to.
Right.
Everything is weightless.
Right.
So it is like lying on bed for 8 days and then suddenly waking up and starting your usual chores. So you do feel, incompetent.
Also, sir, whenever I Google you, it always says Indian cosmonaut. What is the difference between a cosmonaut and an astronaut?
Spelling.
Okay.
So that's it. Because we always thought that there is some scientific definition to it and we couldn't find it.
Well, the Americans call it astral plane. The Russians call it a cosmos. We are calling our guys Gagannauts.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Gagannauts. That's a great name. That's a great word.
Also, sir, one topic that everybody seems to be interested in, but so far has no evidence of, is aliens. What are your thoughts on aliens? Do you believe they exist?
Oh, yes. I do believe.
Why exactly?
I believe that because it's typically arrogant of us humans to think that we are the only intelligent human beings in this vast universe. So I'm quite sure that there are other civilizations which we have not chanced upon. And you can't question belief, in the sense that this is what I believe and this is what one wants to believe. And I guess when I was a kid, I used to read books on by Erich von Däniken, and he had floated quite a few theories. And one of his books had this intriguing title, Was God an Astronaut? He wanted to know. So, and plus he's presented a whole lot of evidence that years ago, how were these things made on Earth when you didn't have the kind of equipment, and human beings would take much, much longer to put stuff together. And, there were pictures which they've discovered of the Earth, drawings, which could only have been observed from space.
Right.
How did they happen? So there are a lot of imponderables, and science fiction, like physics grabs you, science fiction grabbed me when I was a kid. And I felt that if yesterday's science fiction is today's reality, then today's science fiction, which talks of alien contact, which talks of
Wormholes.
black holes, all sorts of stuff, parallel universes. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Okay. Speaking of which, I want to ask about the current space program that is happening. They went to the International Space Station, and over there, an alien sort of space bug has been detected in the spacecraft, and they have obviously evacuated them from there, and they are unable to catch it and test it. Do you exactly have any thoughts as to what that may be?
You're talking about the superbug.
Yes,
the superbug.
Just found out, yeah. So that is, it happens on Earth as well. Every organism has got its own built-in method,
right,
to increase its longevity, right?
Yes.
So, which is how mutation happens.
Right.
So this is one of those things. Of course, they make sure that when you are preparing for the space flight, that's the reason why you're put in quarantine, because in case there are any latent problems, if you are carrying any infection, you don't want to take it up and leave it in the space station.
Yes.
And that is what may have happened. Some sort of virus or so-called bug must have gone up, which over time has mutated, because the environment over there is kept clean now and then. And when it felt probably the bug that I won't be able to survive in such clean, it mutated enough to continue to exist in this environment. And that is what I think they're referring to as the superbug. I don't know much, it's not my subject, but this is what I feel.
Okay. Why is there no such plan that the public knows of right now to send humans into space ever since you went?
You're referring primarily to
India.
ISRO,
Yes.
yes. So, Vikram Sarabhai, these were great visionaries.
Yes.
And remember that when our space program started, it was when? Late 50s. We were a third world nation. We were a poor nation. We had no business to be in this business of space. But these visionaries like Sarabhai and all felt that if we are going to be one of the players in this new technology of going to space, then that technology we must develop specifically for the benefit of our people. And therefore, the focus was on applications. What can space do to impact the lives of our countrymen, right?
Right.
Which is why they stuck to the satellites, and which is how today, India is a leading power in satellite technology. And along with that, there were spin-offs with communication, controls, how to control satellites in space, remote sensing. And what does remote sensing do? It sends back data to you, which you interpret to find out what lies beneath the surface of our country's landmass. Right? Whether it is on the coastline, whether it is fisheries, where is plankton growing so that your catch is more productive, how much of the snow is there in the Himalayas, how much water will then be available for irrigation. So these are all parameters which help you plan and develop your economy, right? And all of it is impacting the lives of our countrymen. Telecommunication, television, connectivity. You don't have to. Your tech does not improve the lives very slowly. With these things, like you're using television for education, in the site experiment which India did. So we have, I think, milked space technology very fruitfully for our use, and I also think that we've proved to the world that space need not necessarily be anything which is which shows us as very advanced, but we are very focused on using space tech for something productive for our people.
Okay, what's next though? How do you see ISRO as a organization in the future?
Let me come up with a disclaimer here. What I'm going to say is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I don't hold a position with ISRO. I don't hold any position with the government of India. Therefore, I have no idea what the grand plan is 15, 20 years from now. But what I would like to see is that if we are going to continue with deep space exploration, I think today the focus is mostly on exploitation and not so much on exploration. Exploration, yes, but to only find out what can be exploited.
Okay.
That is what the focus is. Whether you want to mine asteroids which are going past, whether you want to find out helium or water on the moon and use it for energy, whatever it is, everything can be monetized, and that's where the focus is.
Right.
Whereas I believe that if we sit down and dissect why is there conflict on planet Earth, it's very easy to find out that over the years, when you go about dispossessing, when the weak are dispossessed of their resources by the strong, who are, due to conflicts, that is when conflicts never die. If you're going to Africa ostensibly to raise the level of the people out there,
But you're actually not.
But you're actually not. You want the natural resources which are available there.
Right.
So if we are going to continue down this path, you will only be exporting conflict from planet Earth into outer space. So the idea is to address the core issue. And that is why I felt that first we must fix society the way we live here to remove these dissimilarities.
Right.
Before you go farming elsewhere. Otherwise, if you follow the same protocol, then there's going to be no change. And this, I think, is the right moment. It's the first time that our civilization is moving out of planet Earth. It's a good point to sit and reflect and introspect as to how can we make our tomorrows better than our yesterdays. Otherwise, we'll remain trapped in our circle of conflict.
Speaking of moving out of Earth, I of course have to ask about Elon Musk. What are your thoughts on his vision for humanity moving to other planets and eventually other galaxies also? How do you see that folding out?
Well, a person like Elon Musk, I think if you focus on his Tesla being in orbit, basically he's using space as a billboard for what he's producing. And when a private sector gets into space exploration, it is always for profit.
Right, yes.
Right? And if it is for profit, he has no choice. Whoever is running the show from the private sector has to keep his shareholders happy.
Definitely.
So there is no way he's going to share the resources. You might have United Nations resolutions, which 160 countries or so have signed in 40 years ago, saying that space belongs to humanity. if space belongs to humanity, whatever you get from space, everybody should be a
Get a share,
shareholder
yeah.
on Earth.
Exactly.
Right? How do we make that happen? Exploration going forward, I think, will remain the preserve of governments, and exploitation going forward will remain with the private sector. But there have to be some space laws have to be in position which are well thought out, which are properly enforced, so that there is equitable distribution. Otherwise, there's no point building a far off hell when you've got the potential to have heaven right here on earth.
Right.
Right.
That's what I feel.
So, sir, the crew that went with you then in 84, did they remain in touch with you after that, after coming back? Have they been in touch off late? Like, are they,
It's
were they
like
allowed
this.
to?
Yeah. What happened is that after I got back, my life changed, right? I became somebody in people's eyes. Somebody, as far as I was concerned, I was the same guy who was a professional who went, did his job, returned back, and wanted to continue doing my old job for which I had the core skills. But I had to share my time playing celebrity, playing this thing. It was very difficult to match both the roles which I needed to play. So I didn't have much time left to continue. It was not part of my mandate to maintain that kind of connection with these guys. And so we used to meet now and then we're all members of the Association of Space Explorers. So those were fleeting contacts. They continued to be busy, but then a very significant event took place after my space flight with them. That is, the Soviet Union fell.
Right.
And it became Russia. And it created quite a social upheaval from within the cosmonaut community. So they kind of were busy, I would say, existing in this new environment, whereas nothing changed for me except for what I've just described,
right.
the split roles.
Right.
So I was busy focusing. So there was no social exchange. उन दिनों में मतलब Facebook वगैरह,
there was no mobile, nothing.
Mobile, so none of that was there. So therefore there was fleeting contacts. But again, like I said, they're no more now. They passed on earlier, and I got busy with my own life.
Right. So we've been having a lot of conversations on the show with, Vedic scholars, Sanskrit scholars, people who talk about ancient India, ancient technologies, ancient wisdom. And I just want to ask you, try and draw a parallel between, what is modern science and the future of science versus what these people, the Hindu scholars, Vedic scholars who come on our show, they've been talking about, that a lot of the stuff that modern science is talking about in the future has already happened in the past with similar or even more advanced technologies in the past in India. For example, there is the Pushpak Vimana, which is just a small example. But in the Mahabharata, there is when Arjuna prays to Shiva and asks him for a boon, Shiva comes and checks it out and tests him. And finally, the gods bless him with a chariot. But that chariot, instead of a Sarthi, has a pilot. And that chariot is fully loaded with such kind of tech that, Arjuna actually makes that trip into space, where it is beautifully described in great detail with a lot of perfection in the Mahabharata, where he goes into space and he actually starts seeing that the earth is getting smaller and smaller and he sees no boundaries. And then he goes up and up and up, and finally he sees the stars. And when he sees the stars, he wonders what is the way to heaven. And his pilot says that there is a particular constellation or a set of stars that you follow, and he actually reaches Swarg. And then he describes Swarg in great detail and comes back to planet Earth. So what are your thoughts of this? Like, do you think that this kind of tech has existed in the past and it's been wiped out, or we have lost it? And is it a cycle that, okay, when once we reach, again, when mankind reaches that kind of level of civilization and technology, will we self-destruct again and again reinvent everything? Is it just a cycle that we are in, or is it just by chance and this is just mythology?
Yeah, so I think there are two answers, and I think we must delineate them. Mythology is a construct, I think, of imagination, story writing. Of course, it may be rooted in the truthfulness of the times,
Right.
which they might, yes. But mythology is mythology. But if you look at things only scientifically, many scientific minds during their research journey have realized that they've hit a wall.
Right.
And they've realized that something lies across, but they don't know what it is. Take that aside. There is enough and more evidence because of our long history and where we are unearthing facts that point directly to a part of knowledge which we already knew, and like you rightly said, which we've forgotten. So if you focus on those things, then obviously, if I were to build a scenario, and today we are all under the sword of Damocles is hanging on our existence because of the asteroids which are going past. Right? If one of them hits planet Earth, right, an ice age develops, and there is again thought that the ice age happened because of an asteroid hit. It changes the environment. The sun is unable to penetrate. And that is when you start losing whatever accumulated knowledge you had.
Right.
But if our mythology says we had Pushpak Vimanas, meaning we've conquered space at that time, and you had methods of navigating, then you would have had computers in a different form.
Right.
So why wasn't that knowledge, captured,
Saved.
and saved to be in indestructible cauldrons? It should have been there.
Or maybe so there was an event which was so destructive that everything got destroyed, and we were in an ice age without any life on Earth for
Right.
thousands of years or maybe millennia.
Yeah. And then some other stellar dust comes with some life form.
Correct.
And then
Replants.
grows, gets planted here by when the environment has changed. So our idea of time scale is really, our blinders are on, and it's our lifetime, which is a nanosecond of the real existence. So I think we got to see this. You have to remain curious. You have to remain a student. You have to shed your arrogance that we are the best. We don't know. We don't know how much there is that we don't know. There's enough and more we are unaware of.
I think the more
but we must admit the possibility that such things are possible.
I think the more we discover, the more we learn that we don't know much.
Exactly.
We know so less.
Exactly. But then that should be the attitude we inculcate in ourselves. And that is the surest way of growing, actually.
Right.
Otherwise, you stagnate.
Yeah, otherwise you're stagnant. So another question I had is that, like you mentioned, about bodily functions, the way the heart changes, the things in your body start to happen once you're into orbit and, your weightlessness. Any other anomalies, like, does time behave differently there? Did you notice that, okay, the seconds are different or anything of that sort?
When you fly from here to New York, 16-hour flight, your whole circadian rhythm changes.
Absolutely.
Your body clock changes. When you go up into space, you don't suffer from jet lag. Although you are going around the Earth every 90 minutes, but you don't change any time zones. You launch on a standard time, and you work on that standard time. So there is no time zone change. If you launch in the evening, the first meal you have out there is dinner. And you start ignoring that every 45 minutes there's a sunrise, every 45 minutes there's a sunset. So you don't follow that day-night cycle at all. You just follow the clock.
Right.
And that's your life. You live by the clock. And if you live by the clock, there's no jet lag.
Right. What about meals, sir? Like, what kind of food does one eat in space?
Yeah,
like, is it everything regular? That can you eat like dal chawal?
We had a great time. There were 70 dishes we could choose from.
Oh,
because
wow.
So during training, they would map what are your favorites and make sure that that is there, because that contributes substantially to your morale when you're so-called in isolation. I'm not solitary confinement, but you're all trapped in that cylinder, and right. so these aspects for your mental health are some compensations that you can at least get what you're fond of eating. So,
but was there any fear when you went up, like, that, I may not make it back to planet Earth, my family, things like that? Does that engulf you?
That's a very individual thing. It's how you prepare yourself.
Right.
And in passing, you had asked me about that mental aspect.
Right.
So, to give you, I'm not running my guys down. To give you an idea that on launch, about 10 seconds before launch, my engineer, Gennady, his heart rate was 120 or so. Why? Because 3 months earlier, he was launching for another mission when the rocket exploded on the launch pad due to a fuel leak. And he ejected out his capsule along with his commander, and both of them safely parachuted on the side. So that was his experience, which was just 3 months old.
So he was fearful.
So obviously he was fearful. Now, and I was watching that live on TV as part of our training, that this is how a launch takes place.
My God.
So
you saw that explode.
We saw it explode. But then I also know that the escape system worked,
Yeah.
So what do I focus on? The escape system worked. So that's the worst case scenario. Second, if your life is going to be dependent on a computer, your sitting and worrying is not going to help at all.
Right.
So my heart rate was 60.
But then did he continue with the mission 10 seconds before launch if his heart rate was 120? Was he allowed to go up or?
Yeah.
It was
they
managed.
are monitoring it. But हमारा heart rate भी वैसे ही जाता है. But provided you're in charge of that aircraft, you're on the ground, a single seater, you signed for it, like I just told you, you're about to release brakes. Acha bhai, got to be careful, and I'm testing this aeroplane. Anything can go wrong. That's a lot more stressful than being strapped up and waiting for things to happen over which you have no control.
Right. Also, so when you go up in space, there are a lot of naysayers on planet Earth even today who, don't believe in God. They just say, okay, we don't believe God exists. But when when people go up in space, does that change? Did you have anyone like that in your crew who said, okay, I'm not a believer in God, but now when I go up and I see all this creation, which cannot be man-made, there has to be some other intelligent beings per se, or Mother Nature, or maybe it's, a highly set of evolved engineers that have done this from another civilization. Do they start believing in that respect that, there are higher beings than us who have created this, or demigods or gods? Does that discussion ever take place in space amongst?
No, it doesn't, because you're coming into contact with other professionals all the while, and it's a very personal thing, actually. Whether you're a believer, atheist, or whether you're a religious person, it's what you believe in and what your faith is. As far as I'm concerned, everything could have been an accident, could not have been an accident also. If there is some God, Wouldn't he have liked to fix everything all the time? If he would have been all powerful, all seeing. So there are, the logic militates against one super being.
Right.
And if I look back at my own career, many a time I found myself in situations which appeared irretrievable. And if I'm honest with myself, I know that I got out of those situations not due to my skill. I cannot answer how I got out of those situations.
Divine intervention.
So, is there a divine being? Is there a divine force? That is where your faith comes in.
So, sir, I have a question regarding career a little bit. The way you actually became a Gaganaut is through a happenstance of events.
Happens, absolutely.
So, how exactly do you become a Gaganaut now? Because every third kid in school, when asked, what do you want to be when you grow up, says, I want to be an astronaut. What is your advice to them?
So, let's
What's the pathway like?
Yeah, so now everybody thinks that to be an astronaut, you got to follow the same trajectory as, say, I did, which
Right.
means join the Air Force, which means be a fighter pilot, which means be a test pilot, and then get selected from amongst test pilots. Anybody who goes higher than that Karman line, which is 100 kilometers, technically is an astronaut. Okay. Tomorrow, if you're going to set up colonies in space, you will require professionals with different skill sets because you have to build up a colony in space, which means you've got to create. There'll be structural engineers, there'll be architects, there'll be environmental engineers, and they'll all have to work on site, right? To create that environment which is life-giving. It may be a bubble which you'll have to create. So all the experts of all the verticals needed to work on the moon, they will all be astronauts. So you just focus on, find what grabs you. Are you a student? Are you a researcher? Are you a scientist? What do you want to do? You just excel in your line. And if you want to discover as part of your research whether the space environment will benefit your research, then you aspire for astronaut banna hai, who is an astronaut?
Right.
Anybody who works there is an astronaut.
Right.
You don't have to be in the cockpit and you don't have to be a pilot.
Right.
Kalpana Chawla was not a pilot.
Right.
She was an engineer, working for that communication company. And she got to ride in the space shuttle because her company was launching a satellite. And you get to ride as a representative of the company that has built that satellite because you know how to launch it. You know how to commission it in space. That's how.
Right.
So you mentioned that, ISRO is now looked at as a big force in space exploration and space tech and advancements in space, deep space exploration, etc. Where are we in the world order? Like, in terms of NASA, the US, the Soviet space program, the Chinese space program, there's us, the Japs involved, the Germans are there. Where are we in the pecking order, sir? Like, as per your personal opinion, where are we?
Yeah, so I believe I can see some green shoots in the way we are looking at space. Just as, India has always stayed the course of what they believe in. We've never competed with anybody. We've just done our thing. And our thing was focused on, like I've explained earlier, how space technology can help our people. And that is what we'll keep doing, which is why we've offered free rides to developed nations also for sending their experiments on our vehicles.
Right.
And we are sharing the data. So ours has been a very inclusive approach. And I think that's what is needed going forward, because I believe that future space exploration is beyond the ken of any one nation. We will be forced to collaborate. And if we can get the others to start thinking like us and make it an inclusive, if I can call it,
A combined effort.
instead of Indian Space Research Organization,
It could be World Space Research.
United Nations Space Organization, something like that. So that will give an added impetus to the treaties which are already there in the United Nations. Of course, today United Nations is toothless. Somehow it's being run only by America and then the Big Five. So till such time, so we need to democratize space. That's what we need to do.
Right. Also, science fiction, which you are a big fan of today, is so America central, because all aliens always attack America in the movies. Nobody comes to India or China or Japan or Germany or Russia. They're always landing up in the US, and it's the US who takes the baton and says that, okay, we are going to fight them off, and we're going to save humanity. So I guess that's where you're coming from. But so I mean, there's so many other questions I have. A lot of experiments in the past have happened where they've tried to send animals in space, and there's always talks about let's send a monkey in space or a chicken in space and see how they behave, or a dog. So I mean, is that just to test how the body will behave, or is it just to show that, okay, we have sent a dog in space?
See, all of that happened before the animal activists became vocal.
Right.
So Russia sent Laika, but even Body Shop and all used to test on animals first. Aajkal wo sab band ho gaya.
Right.
So today
secretly chal raha hai kahin wo.
We don't need to do it like that. Our computer simulation models have become so good that you really don't need to test.
We don't need to trouble the animals
on human. So and now Russia has an immense amount of data on how humans can survive in space for longer durations, because they've been holding the world record and they have focused on those kind of things, whereas America has only focused on exploitation to how to monetize space. So at some point you have to converge. At some point you have to agree as to what is the approach going to be. It just doesn't make sense that you're pushing off zillions of kilometers away once you've cracked the propulsion mode, so that the timeline does not, you shouldn't die before you reach your destination.
Absolutely,
So once you've cracked that, then to reach someplace so far off and then say, I come from India, I come from China, it doesn't make sense. You come from planet Earth.
Right.
So your whole perspective
becomes macro.
Has to change. It has to.
Right.
You have to, you may act local, but you must start thinking global.
Right.
And this is without disrespect to your flag.
Right. And so he asked you about aliens, and you said that yes, of course, we would be too arrogant to feel that or to think that it's just us in this whole universe. And I completely agree with that. That there is a lot of talk nowadays that, okay, we're not alone. America has a place called Area 51.
Called?
Area 51. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know, but people have said that they have UFOs there, they have captured aliens there, they are studying their anatomy, they have scientists working on this over time, it's all hush-hush. Is this really true? I mean, or is it just hogwash?
I don't know. I don't know, because it's all hush-hush, like you said.
Right.
It could be a testing ground for their latest weapon systems. I don't know. It's just that, the media today can create so much of disinformation.
Right.
You don't know where the truth model exists.
Right.
We don't know.
Has India, in any of its ISRO forgive me, for ISRO, have they experienced any form of communication from extraterrestrial life or any such thing ever?
Search has been going on. There's radio telescopes, huge places, antennas and field of antennas, a farm of antennas, trying to decipher what is coming, any intelligent transmission from space. How do you separate cosmic noise from intelligent transmissions? ये सब चल रहा है. We have not yet come to any conclusion.
All right.
So we're just kind of waiting for things to happen.
Right.
But again, talking of feelings, I'll just share one of my experiences. When I was in Nasik, one fine evening at night, we saw a bunch of lights in an arrowhead formation just streaking across the sky. And I just happened to look at my watch. And next day I read that it was seen at the same time over Pune, over Ahmedabad. And so people ask me, how big was that object? Firstly, you couldn't make out the contours of the object. How big was it? You cannot express an opinion till you know the original size of the object. Only then you would be able to say it was that high. And if it was that high, it was moving at that speed. It could only have been debris entering the atmosphere and,
breaking up.
So, so the point is that you don't have incontrovertible evidence which shows you.
But people are so intrigued now in these things.
They are intrigued because it's a different form of science fiction. Instead of writing, people like I've been captivated by movies like where aliens and humans meet, Third Encounters,
right?
Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, of third kind.
So this kind
Interstellar, I don't know if you've seen Interstellar, Prometheus.
You've seen Martians and all.
Right.
Gravity.
Have you seen the entire Alien series?
No, not the entire.
Because that's got a very good description of how it basically answers the age-old question that has plagued us from the start, that where do we come from, where are we going, why are we here? The three basic questions that everyone wants to know, which nobody has answers to today.
That our culture is the best to find answers.
Because the way our culture has explained the entire origins of man or life and where are we headed and what are our purposes and how do we find that purpose is so beautifully explained in our spiritual world.
Indeed.
Right.
Absolutely. I agree.
Right. And so what, like you mentioned, you have a wish list that, what you would like ISRO to do. If you were given an opportunity to go back in time 40 years ago and do things differently, would you do that? Would you do anything different while going back into space? Or
no.
Would you just
you
go with the flow?
Forget 40 years. Today you ask anybody, do you want to go into space? The answer will be yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it is an experience worth getting. That's all.
Speaking of going into space and the training you went through, I'm pretty sure depression must have been an issue for some people, if not you. And depression is a very common problem now in society. What is your advice as a very, say, stoic personality who's endured so many mental challenges throughout the way? What is your advice for society on dealing with depression today?
In what setting?
Any setting. Whatever the problem may be. It may be some sort of, it could also be that there is no problem and some people just get depressed for some weird reason. It could be that they are going through a very tough time through very lot of hard work.
General life.
You went through. Anything of that sort.
Like you mentioned that, rather we need to fix what's here on this planet before we export this hell out. I think his question is surrounding that, that how do we keep our minds stable on this planet? What's your advice to people? Having endured so much of stress going into space and back, stress on this planet may seem like frivolous to you. People are fighting over land, over money. Today, brothers are fighting over, the father is fighting with the son is fighting with the mother. People are abandoning their parents. There's so much of nonsense going on this planet. What's your advice to people?
It's a very deep question. Firstly, I think the answer lies within ourselves. So I think we need to quieten our mind. We need to be selective. There is so much of information, basically, which is confusing the hell out of us. We don't today know what is right, what is wrong, what is truthful, what is not, what has been manufactured. Now, when artificial intelligence has also come into the loop, you don't know, what is the truth. So I think you should just doubt everything and understand the fickleness of human nature. And if you want to insulate yourself from these kind of pulls and pressures which are surrounding you, the only answer is to study yourself. Yeah. So you must get to know yourself better, your strengths, your weaknesses, and don't get impressed by whatever anybody says. So you be a doubting Thomas, but at the same time, it doesn't mean there are limits. You be middle of the road, consciously block out inputs which are coming, and which you must know that they can be manipulated, and most of them are, in fact, marketing, pharmacy. People will sell you. You can sell ice to the Eskimos if you do it properly. So such a thing is possible. You got to be your own teacher, but your own teacher by studying yourself, not by studying books or other people's journeys. You've got to find your own way and believe in yourself. Believe in your intelligence. We are intelligent people, but we have not been leveraging our intelligence very well.
Using it in the wrong ways.
Yeah, we're easily swayed.
Right.
But that is the power of technology today.
Right. So I have one last question. There are naysayers today who say that, deep space exploration, what's the purpose of doing that? Where, we haven't even explored our oceans. We should be rather focusing our tech and resources on exploring our own oceans because they also contain a hidden wealth of knowledge. So my belief as a common citizen of India would be that, why can't both happen together? But then the naysayers say that, first do that, spend all your resources on that. There is a lot of science, tech, information, wealth of knowledge available in our oceans rather than going into space. What's your take on that?
My take on that is that the rate at which technology is advancing, a chronological approach, first do this and then do that, will not work.
It's not going to work.
We got to be, our progress has to be on parallel paths.
Right.
Okay. And as you talked about oceans, we are doing a lot of work on the ocean. We are mining manganese and stuff. We've mapped the oceans already. By we, I mean India.
Right.
So we are aware of all this, and you're right. Why only space? All that is available. The thing is that we've got to question ourselves whether what we have done thus far, would we do that differently? Would we split the atom and keep it only for energy, or should we allow it to be used for conflicts and bombs?
Right.
So today we are at that point with artificial intelligence. Have we written the rule book? Do we have a system of policing it? Do we have a system of fixing people who use it wrongly? So that is what I say. We have to be very, very circumspect about all these things.
Right.
And I think this is the right time to change people's attitudes. There's no point trundling around, and you've got to become a bit more proactive, because that's how fast technology is moving. First do this and then do that, you will be left behind. I'll just give you an example. In the 60s, That's the first time, 1903, Wilbur Wright flew, right?
Right.
And within, say, about 60, and how much did he fly? Some 80 feet or something.
Right.
And some 50, 60 years later, Russia built a transport aircraft, and Oliver and Wilbur Wright's flight could have taken place inside that aircraft.
It was so
That's
big.
such a huge aircraft.
Right.
A few years later, Armstrong was walking on the moon. What are we talking about? So if that much has happened in 70 odd years, and the way things are now, there was a book by Alvin Toffler which said future shock. And now future shock has now become, it's not so much the change which is taking place as the rate of change, which is overwhelming us.
Right.
So we got to act. And for that kind of change, that the rate of change, you cannot be, पहले ये करना है, बाद में वो करेंगे, later.
It has to be multi-pronged.
It has to be parallel. Everything has to be parallel.
So having heard such lovely and wonderful anecdotes about space from you, and how there is so much of conflict unnecessarily on Earth over such frivolous issues, what would be your message to people on planet Earth?
Well, I would like to say that we live on a beautiful planet. There is nothing for miles and miles around. We are not only interconnected, we are interdependent. So therefore, we must understand that we are blessed to live on a planet like planet Earth. And therefore, we need to nurture it, care for it. You won't find this kind of beauty. Well, we haven't seen it till as far as the Webb telescope can see. It's all arid, whether it's Moon or Mars. So this is where we were born. We may go out, have a look at other places, but this is where we live. This is our home, and we must then therefore look after it. And let us have a peaceful community. If you have conflict in and around you, it will always reach within us. So therefore, it's necessary that we introspect, we bring peace within ourselves, and all work for peace so that we all enjoy our good luck of staying on planet Earth. Jai Hind.
So I think, Jai Hind, sir, this has been so wonderful and uplifting for us. It feels like we've taken off right now. You've made this whole episode so beautiful, and the way you've explained everything and humanity, like, the way you've touched upon, what humans should be like. I think that's the takeaway, that I will see from this episode. And thank you so much. And once again, sir, Sare Jahan Se Acha.
Thank you.
Hindustan Hamara.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.